Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question for a second. What if the paycheck you've been chasing your entire life is actually the thing keeping you broke? Not broke like you can't pay rent. I'm talking broke in a deeper way. Broke in the way where you work 40 hours a week, sometimes 50, sometimes 60, and yet somehow every single month you're still just making it. Still just surviving. Still looking at your bank account on a Thursday before payday and thinking, how is this my life? You followed the rules. You did everything they told you to do. You went to school. You got the job. Maybe you even got the promotion. And still, it feels like you're running on a hamster wheel that someone else controls. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. A salary is not a financial plan. It is a financial trap. The wealthiest people in America, the ones quietly building empires while the rest of the country trades time for money, they don't think in paychecks. They don't think in hours. They don't think in jobs. They think in systems. And that right there, that single shift in how you think, is the difference between a life you earn and a life you build. This audiobook is going to show you exactly how to make that shift. Not with theory, not with fluff, with real frameworks, real examples, and a completely new way of seeing money, time, and freedom. You're listening to Cash Flow Mastery. Think in systems, not salaries, and your financial life is about to change. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here on Mindset Audiobooks, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now, because every week we drop full-length audiobooks designed to reshape the way you think about money, success, and the life you're capable of building. If you've been here before, you already know. Let's get into it. There's a phrase that most financially successful people in America quietly understand, but rarely say in polite company. Don't work for money. Build something that works for you. Simple enough to say. Incredibly hard to believe. Especially if you were raised in a household where a steady paycheck felt like safety, and everything else felt like a gamble. Most of us grew up in a salary mindset. And that's not a criticism, it's just a fact. Our parents, our teachers, our guidance counselors, they were all operating from the same playbook. Study hard, get a good job, work your way up, retire at 65. Maybe if you're smart about it, you'll have a 401k with enough in it to not embarrass yourself. That was the deal. That was the dream. But somewhere along the way, the deal changed. Inflation kept creeping up. Housing prices exploded. The cost of healthcare, childcare, education, all of it went vertical. And that comfortable middle-class life that a salary was supposed to guarantee, it started slipping away, quietly, year by year, like sand through your fingers. And here's what nobody told us. The problem was never the amount of the salary. The problem was the model itself. A salary, no matter how big it gets, is a single stream of income tied directly to your presence and your time. The moment you stop showing up, it stops coming in. That's not a wealth strategy. That's a dependency. And in a world that can lay you off with 2 weeks' notice, outsource your role to software, or restructure your entire department overnight, a dependency is a liability. This audiobook, Cash Flow Mastery, Think in Systems, Not Salaries, is about dismantling that model in your mind before you try to dismantle it in your life. Because here's what I've learned studying the people who've actually achieved financial freedom in this country. Not the lottery winners, not the trust fund kids, but the regular people, the teachers who became landlords, the nurses who built online businesses, the ex-corporate guys who walked away from 6-figure salaries to earn 7 figures on their own terms. Every single one of them made one fundamental mental shift before anything else changed. They stopped asking, how much am I getting paid? And they started asking, how do I build something that pays me whether I'm working or not? That question, right there, is the doorway to everything in this book. We're going to walk through 10 chapters together. Each one is going to hand you a new lens, a new framework, a new way of seeing your money, your time, and your potential. We're going to talk about the psychology of passive income, the mechanics of cash flow systems, how to identify what you already have that could generate money, how to stop leaking wealth through habits you don't even realize you have, and how to start building, even if you're starting from zero. This is not a get-rich-quick book. Let me say that clearly, because I respect you too much to waste your time with that. This is a get-rich-right book. It's about building something real, something sustainable, something that gives you the one thing money is actually supposed to buy, and most people never get. Options. The option to say no. The option to take the trip. The option to be present for your kids. The option to walk away from anything that doesn't serve your life anymore. That's what cash flow mastery really is. It's not a number in your bank account. It's a feeling. It's a posture. It's the quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing your life doesn't depend on someone else's budget decisions. And you can build it. Absolutely, you can. But first, you have to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an architect. Let's build. Chapter 1. The Salary Illusion. Why your paycheck is your biggest financial blind spot. Let's start with something that might sting a little. If you earn a salary, whether it's $45,000 a year or $145,000 a year, and that salary is your only source of income, you are one bad week away from a financial crisis. One medical emergency. One layoff. One divorce. One company bankruptcy. One economic recession. One restructuring memo on a Monday morning. Just one. And suddenly, the financial life you've been carefully building, the car payments, the mortgage, the streaming subscriptions, the kids' activities, the retirement contributions, all of it starts to teeter. Because everything you built was sitting on a single pillar. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not here to shame anyone for having a job. Jobs are real. Jobs matter. Jobs pay the bills today while you build the systems that will pay the bills tomorrow. The problem isn't the salary itself. The problem is the illusion that the salary creates. The illusion that because money is coming in regularly, you are financially secure. You are not financially secure because money is coming in. You are financially secure when money can come in without you having to show up to make it happen. Let me put that another way, because it's worth sitting with. Imagine two people. Let's call them Marcus and David. Both are 38 years old. Both live in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. Both own a home. Both have 2 kids. Both drive a nice car. Marcus earns $110,000 a year as a senior operations manager at a logistics company. He's worked there for 11 years. He's respected, reliable, and really good at what he does. He has about $40,000 in savings and a 401k that's slowly growing. David earns roughly $95,000 a year, but that number comes from 4 different places. He has a rental property that brings in $1,800 a month after expenses. He has an online course he built 2 years ago that generates about $1,200 a month on autopilot. He owns a small vending machine route that clears around $600 a month. And he does occasional consulting work that fills in the gaps. Now here's the question. Which man is wealthier? Most people's instinct is to say Marcus, because his number is higher and his income is more stable. But think about what happens when both of them lose their primary job tomorrow. Marcus loses $110,000. He has $40,000 in savings, which, depending on his lifestyle, buys him maybe 6 to 8 months before the panic really sets in. David loses his consulting income, sure, but his rental still pays. His course still sells. His vending route still runs. He doesn't go from $95,000 to zero. He goes from $95,000 to something closer to $43,000. And he didn't have to do a single extra thing to keep that money flowing. Who sleeps better at night? That's the difference between a salary and a system. And here's what's wild. David's setup didn't happen because he was smarter than Marcus. It happened because he stopped asking, how do I earn more? And started asking, how do I build more streams? The psychology behind the salary trap. There's a reason we cling to salaries even when we know, intellectually, that they're limiting us. It's called certainty bias. Human beings are hardwired to prefer a guaranteed smaller reward over an uncertain larger one. It's evolutionary. Back when our ancestors were hunting and gathering, uncertainty usually meant danger. Certainty meant survival. But in the modern financial world, that instinct works against us. The certainty of a paycheck feels safe. Starting a side business feels risky. Buying a rental property feels scary. Building passive income feels complicated and far away. So we stay. We stay in the salary. We tell ourselves we'll start something when the time is right. When we have more money saved. When the kids are older. When things slow down at work. But here's the brutal math of waiting. Every year you delay building a system is a year that system can't compound. And compound growth, whether it's financial, relational, or reputational, is the most powerful force in wealth building. Albert Einstein allegedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. Whether he actually said it or not, the math proves the point. A system you build today doesn't just earn money today. It earns money next year, and the year after, and 10 years from now, often growing as it goes. A salary you earn today pays for today. Nothing more. The 3 lies we were told about money. If you grew up in a working class or middle class American household, and statistically most of us did, there's a good chance you were raised on at least one of these 3 financial myths. And it's worth naming them clearly, because you can't unlearn something you haven't identified. Lie number 1. A good salary means financial success. A high salary means you have high earning capacity. That's it. What you do with that earning capacity determines whether you're building wealth or just funding a more expensive lifestyle. There's a word for when your spending rises to match your income no matter how high it goes. Economists call it lifestyle inflation. Regular people call it the reason their high-earning friends are somehow still broke. Study after study in the United States has shown that income and net worth are only loosely correlated. There are teachers with more net worth than doctors. There are custodians who retired with more financial security than executives. The salary is the input. The system is what determines the output. Lie number 2. Your job is your most valuable asset. No. Your job is your most valuable liability, because it consumes your most irreplaceable resource, which is time, in exchange for money that stops the moment you stop performing. Your most valuable asset is your ability to think differently about money. And once you develop that ability, once you start seeing cash flow as something to be engineered rather than earned, your job becomes a tool, a launch pad, a funding mechanism for the systems you're building. But as long as you believe your job is your asset, you will protect it like it's the most important thing in your life. You'll stay late. You'll cancel vacations. You'll say yes to every extra project. You'll negotiate for raises instead of building revenue streams. And the company will love you for it, because a man who believes his job is his most important asset will do anything to keep it. Lie number 3. Debt is always bad. This one is more nuanced, so pay attention. Consumer debt, the kind you rack up buying things that depreciate, like cars and TVs and handbags and vacations on a credit card. Yes, that's bad. That's a leak in your financial system that needs to be plugged. But structural debt, the kind used to acquire an asset that generates income greater than the cost of the debt, that is how most real wealth is built in America. Every major commercial landlord in this country uses debt. Every business owner who finances equipment uses debt. The wealthy don't avoid debt. They understand the difference between debt that costs them money and debt that makes them money. This distinction alone, between good debt and bad debt, is something that most American high schools have never once taught. And that's not an accident. A population that doesn't understand the mechanics of wealth will keep renting their time to people who do. What a system actually looks like. At this point you might be thinking, okay, I get it. Salaries are limiting. Systems are better. But what does a system actually look like for a regular person? Not a millionaire, not a tech founder. A regular, working American with bills and kids and maybe $2,000 sitting in a savings account? Good question. Let's make it real. A system is any mechanism that generates income with a lower and lower requirement of your active time as it matures. In the beginning, almost every system requires active time to build. You have to write the course, buy the property, create the content, build the product, develop the client relationships. There is no such thing as passive income that didn't first require active effort to create. But here's the key, that effort is front-loaded. You put in the work once, or you put in the work for a season, and then the system starts running with less and less of your involvement. That's the leverage that a salary will never give you. Let's take a woman named Angela. She lives in Columbus, Ohio. She works as a dental hygienist making $68,000 a year. She's good at her job and she likes it, but she's always aware that her income is capped by the number of appointments she can physically complete in a week. There's no way to work harder and earn significantly more. The ceiling is built into the model. A couple of years ago, Angela started a YouTube channel about oral health, tips for parents, product reviews, explanations of procedures that make people anxious. Nothing fancy. She filmed it on her phone in her kitchen on weekends. 18 months in, she had 40,000 subscribers. YouTube began monetizing her content. Dental product companies began reaching out for sponsorships. She built a small digital guide, the At-Home Dental Care Playbook, that she sells on her website for $27. Today, Angela's dental hygienist salary pays her bills. But her YouTube channel, her guide, and her sponsorships add between $2,000 and $4,000 a month to her income. Income that continues to come in whether she's seeing patients or not, whether she's on vacation or not, whether she's awake or not. Angela didn't become a millionaire overnight. She didn't quit her job. She didn't take a massive risk. She just started building. Slowly, consistently, in the margins of time she already had. That's a system. And it started with a mindset shift, not a financial windfall. The first shift, from how much do I earn, to how much does my money earn. Here's the exercise I want you to start with. And I mean this week, not someday, not when you finish this audiobook. This week. Sit down with a piece of paper, or open a notes app, whatever works for you, and write down every single source of money that came into your life last month. For most people, that list is very short. 1 item. Maybe 2. Now ask yourself, how many of those sources required your direct presence to generate that money? How many of them would have continued even if you'd taken the whole month off? That gap between the income you have and the income that doesn't require your presence. That's the gap this entire book is designed to help you close. The goal is not to immediately quit your job. The goal is to gradually, systematically, intelligently make yourself less financially dependent on any single source of income, starting with the one that requires all of your time. This is how financial freedom is actually built in the real world. Not in one dramatic leap. In a series of deliberate, compounding steps, each one making you a little less vulnerable, a little more free. And the first step, the one you just took by asking that question, is the most important one. Because once you start seeing your financial life in terms of systems rather than salary, you cannot unsee it. You will start noticing the structures that wealthy people use everywhere. You will start recognizing the leaks in your own financial life. You will start thinking like a builder instead of a worker. And that changes everything. You've just identified the illusion. The salary that felt like safety, it was always a ceiling. And every ceiling, once you see it clearly, becomes something you can either accept or architect your way around. In the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into the psychology of why most people know they should build systems but never do, and the single mental rewire that separates the people who stay stuck from the people who actually break free. Here's a question to carry with you into Chapter 2. What would your life look like if your income didn't depend on your attendance? Sit with that. Really sit with it. Because what you're about to discover next is that the answer to that question isn't as far away as you think. And the only thing standing between you and that life isn't money, isn't time, and isn't talent. It's a story you've been telling yourself about what's possible for someone like you. And that story, it ends right here. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Staying Stuck. Why Smart People Never Start. Let's talk about something that nobody in the personal finance world wants to admit out loud. Most of the people who will listen to this audiobook already know what they need to do. They've read the books. They've watched the YouTube videos. They've nodded along to the podcasts. They've highlighted the passages and screenshot the quotes and saved the Instagram infographics about passive income and financial freedom. And then, nothing happened. Not because they're lazy. Not because they're not smart enough. Not because they don't want it badly enough. But because there is a war happening inside every single person who tries to break out of the salary system. A war between the part of you that wants to build something new and the part of you that is absolutely terrified of what building something new actually requires. That war has a name. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. But in plain American English, it's just this. Knowing something and doing something are two completely different skills. And nobody teaches you the second one. So that's what this chapter is about. Not the mechanics of building wealth. We'll get deep into those in the chapters ahead. This chapter is about the invisible force that stops most people before they ever take a single real step. Because if you don't understand this force, you will spend the rest of your life being managed by it without ever realizing it's happening. The comfort zone is not where you think it is. When most people hear comfort zone, they picture someone sitting on their couch, eating chips, avoiding ambition. They picture laziness dressed up as contentment. But that's not what a comfort zone actually looks like for most high-functioning, hard-working Americans. Your comfort zone looks like staying late at a job you've outgrown because at least you know the rules there. Your comfort zone looks like spending your Saturday researching business ideas instead of actually launching one. Because researching feels productive without carrying any real risk. Your comfort zone looks like telling yourself you'll start investing once you have more saved up, even as the years keep passing and the savings keep getting spent on life. The comfort zone, for ambitious people, is not laziness. It is perpetual preparation. It is the endless feeling of almost being ready. It is the masterclass you bought but never finished. It is the business name you picked but never registered. It is the rental property you analyzed for 6 months but never made an offer on. It is motion without movement. And it is one of the most expensive habits a person can have, because every month spent preparing instead of building is a month of compounding that never happened. Here's a real example that puts this into perspective. Think about a guy named Trevor. Trevor is 34 years old, lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and works as an IT project manager making $88,000 a year. Trevor is sharp. Trevor has been planning to start a digital marketing consulting business for 3 years. He has a Notion document with his entire business plan mapped out. He has a logo he designed on Canva. He has a LinkedIn profile that's 98% optimized. He has taken 4 online courses on freelancing and client acquisition. Trevor has 0 clients and 0 revenue from that business. Meanwhile, his colleague Dana, same age, same city, less experience in their field, decided 18 months ago that she was just going to start. She reached out to 3 small businesses in her neighborhood. 2 of them said no. 1 said yes. She charged $500 for her first project, delivered good work, got a referral, and now runs a side business that clears $3,200 a month alongside her full-time salary. Trevor knows more about running a consulting business than Dana does. Trevor's plan is more sophisticated. Trevor's branding is better. And Trevor is still broke on the side while Dana is building something real. What's the difference? Dana chose uncomfortable action over comfortable preparation. The 3 psychological traps that keep people stuck. Now let's name the specific mental traps, because most people experience them without knowing what they're called, which means they have no defense against them. The first trap is called perfectionism, and it is the most socially acceptable form of fear that exists in America today. Perfectionism disguises itself as high standards. It sounds like, I want to do this right. It sounds like, I just need a little more time to get it polished. But underneath every perfectionist impulse is a single core fear. If I put this out into the world and it fails, I will have proof that I'm not good enough. So instead of risking that proof, you never publish. You never launch. You never submit. You keep tweaking endlessly in private, where failure is impossible because nothing has actually been attempted. Here's the antidote. Done is infinitely more valuable than perfect. A mediocre rental property that you actually own builds more wealth than the perfect one you've been analyzing for 2 years. A decent online course that's actually live earns more money than the flawless one still sitting in your drafts folder. Progress over perfection is not a motivational slogan. It is a financial strategy. The second trap is called comparison paralysis. And in the age of social media, this one has become an absolute epidemic in the United States. You see someone on Instagram who built $1 million business by 28, and instead of being inspired, you feel behind. You feel like your starting point is too modest. You feel like the window has closed, the opportunity has passed, and everyone who was going to succeed has already figured it out without you. This thinking is not just wrong, it is mathematically backwards. The best time to start building a cash flow system was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. And the people you're comparing yourself to right now? They spent years being invisible before anyone saw their success. You're comparing your beginning to their middle, and concluding that you don't belong in the story at all. The third trap is called identity lock, and this one runs the deepest. Identity lock is what happens when you have been a certain kind of person for so long that becoming a different kind of person feels like a betrayal of who you are. If you grew up in a household where nobody owned a business, starting a business doesn't just feel unfamiliar. It feels like you're reaching for something that wasn't meant for people like you. If everyone in your family traded time for money their whole lives, building passive income doesn't just feel difficult, it feels presumptuous. Like you're trying to be something you're not. This is the most powerful and most invisible of all three traps, because it operates at the level of identity rather than logic. You can't argue your way out of it with information. You can only move through it by doing something, anything, that proves to yourself that a different version of you is actually possible. The Rewire. From fixed mindset to financial growth mindset. Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford University spent decades studying why some people push through difficulty and others don't. Her conclusion became one of the most important ideas in modern psychology. The concept of the growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their abilities, their intelligence, and their potential are essentially set. They were born with a certain amount of capability, and no amount of effort changes that ceiling. When they fail, it confirms their limits. People with a growth mindset believe that their abilities are developed through dedication and effort. When they fail, it gives them information. When they struggle, it means they're growing. The ceiling isn't fixed, it moves every time they push against it. Now apply this directly to financial thinking. A fixed financial mindset says, I'm not good with money. I'm not a business person. I'm not the type who takes risks. That's just how I am. These statements feel like self-awareness, but they're actually self-imprisonment. They are conclusions masquerading as facts. A growth financial mindset says, I don't yet understand how to manage money well, but that's a skill, and skills can be learned. I don't yet know how to run a business, but that's a process, and processes can be studied. I'm not yet comfortable with calculated risk, but discomfort is a signal of growth, not a signal to stop. Do you feel the difference? One set of statements closes doors. The other opens them. And the beautiful thing about this rewire is that you don't have to believe it fully before you start acting on it. You just have to act on it enough to generate evidence. And the evidence, a first client, a first rental check, a first sale, does the believing for you. The starting line is smaller than you think. One of the biggest myths that keeps Americans stuck in the salary system is the idea that building a cash flow system requires significant upfront capital, that you need money to make money, that the game is rigged in favor of people who already have resources. And while it's absolutely true that having capital accelerates the process, it is categorically false that you need it to begin. Consider what it costs to start a YouTube channel. $0. Consider what it costs to start freelancing your existing professional skills. $0. Consider what it costs to write and sell a digital guide on something you already know. Essentially $0. Consider what it costs to list a spare room on a short-term rental platform. $0 beyond what you already own. The starting line for building your first system is not a bank account with $50,000 in it. The starting line is a decision, followed by 1 hour of focused action, followed by another. Think about a woman named Priya, a high school math teacher in Houston, Texas, earning $54,000 a year. Priya started tutoring students online on weekends through a platform that already had the audience built in. Within 8 months, she was earning an extra $1,100 a month, money that she put directly into a high-yield savings account. When that account hit $8,000, she used it as a down payment contribution toward a small duplex. The duplex now generates $600 a month in net cash flow after the mortgage and expenses. She is now planning her second property. Priya didn't start with capital. She started with an hour on a Saturday morning and a decision that her financial life deserved more than one stream. That's all it took. That's all it ever takes to begin. Your only real competitor is yesterday's version of you. Here's the mindset truth I want you to walk away from this chapter carrying, not just intellectually, but in your bones. The race you're running is not against anyone else. It is not against the person who started younger, or the person who started with more money, or the person whose highlight reel you've been watching on social media while telling yourself the game isn't fair. The only competition that matters is between who you were yesterday and who you choose to be today. Every system that exists in the world right now was built by someone who started before they felt ready. Every passive income stream currently running somewhere was launched by someone who felt fear and did it anyway. Every financial freedom story you've ever been inspired by began with someone in roughly your position, making roughly your choice, to stop waiting and start building. The psychology of staying stuck is real. The traps are real. The fear is real. But none of them are permanent, and none of them are stronger than a made-up mind. You've spent this chapter understanding exactly why your brain fights against the very thing that would set you free. Now you know the enemy. Now you can stop being ambushed by it and start making conscious choices in spite of it. You just looked the real obstacle in the face, and it wasn't money, and it wasn't timing, and it wasn't the economy. It was the story running quietly in the background of your mind every time you got close to starting something real. Now that you've named it, here's what comes next. In Chapter 3, we're going to move from psychology into architecture, because now that your mind is aligned, it's time to understand exactly how cash flow systems are actually structured, how money moves, how leverage works, and how ordinary people in ordinary circumstances build extraordinary financial machines from the ground up. Carry this question into the next chapter. If fear were completely off the table, if failure had zero consequences, what would you build first? Whatever came to mind just now. That's not a fantasy. That's your blueprint. And in the next chapter, we're going to start drawing it up for real. Chapter 3. The architecture of cash flow, how money systems are actually built. There is a moment that happens for almost every person who begins their journey toward financial freedom. And if you haven't experienced it yet, you're about to. It's the moment when you stop seeing wealthy people as lucky, or gifted, or born into the right circumstances, and you start seeing them as engineers. People who learned how money moves, built structures around that movement, and then position themselves to benefit from those structures repeatedly, automatically, and indefinitely. That moment changes everything. Because once you see wealth as something that is designed rather than something that is deserved, you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. This chapter is your introduction to the engineering side of financial freedom. We are going to talk about how cash flow systems are actually built from the ground level up. Not in theory, not in abstraction, but in the real, practical, step-by-step way that real people in real American cities are doing it right now, with real resources that are available to almost anyone willing to pay attention. By the time this chapter is over, you will have a clear mental map of what a cash flow system looks like, how the different types work, how they connect to each other, and, most importantly, where someone in your exact situation could realistically begin building one today. Let's get into it. What a cash flow system actually is. Before we build anything, we need a precise definition, because the word system gets thrown around a lot in financial content without anyone ever stopping to explain what it actually means in practical terms. A cash flow system is any structure, any asset, mechanism, or recurring arrangement that generates money flowing toward you on a repeating basis, with a decreasing requirement of your active time as it matures and stabilizes. Notice that definition has 3 parts, and all 3 parts matter equally. First, it generates money flowing toward you. Not money you go out and earn every day with your labor. Money that comes in because of something you built, bought, or set in motion. Second, it operates on a repeating basis. Not a one-time payout. Not a bonus. Not a lucky windfall. A recurring, predictable flow, like water moving through a pipe rather than a single bucket you have to carry. Third, it requires decreasing active time as it matures. In the beginning you build. You invest time, energy, and often some capital. But over time, the system stabilizes, and your role shifts from builder to overseer, from laborer to architect. That progression, from builder to architect, is the entire journey this audiobook is designed to guide you through. The 4 pillars of cash flow architecture. Every cash flow system that exists, from the simplest to the most sophisticated, is built on one or more of 4 fundamental pillars. Understanding these pillars is like understanding the 4 basic food groups. Once you know them, you can start constructing a diet, or in this case, a financial portfolio that actually nourishes your future. Pillar 1. Asset-based income. This is income generated by something you own that produces value independently of your time. Real estate is the most classic example in America. A rental property that collects rent every month whether you're working or vacationing. But asset-based income also includes dividend-paying stocks, interest-bearing bonds, peer-to-peer lending returns, and ownership stakes in businesses. The defining characteristic of asset-based income is that you buy or build the asset once, and it keeps paying you repeatedly. Your job is to acquire the asset and maintain it, not to produce the income manually every single day. Pillar 2. Intellectual property income. This is income generated by something you create. A book, a course, a piece of software, a template, a piece of music, a patent, a brand. Once created, intellectual property can be sold, licensed, or monetized indefinitely. A course you record over a weekend can sell for years. A book you write in 3 months can generate royalties for decades. A template you design in an afternoon can sit on a marketplace and sell while you sleep. The American digital economy has made intellectual property income more accessible to ordinary people than at any other point in history. And most people are still completely ignoring it. Pillar 3. Network-based income. This is income generated by an audience, a community, or a referral structure that you've built over time. YouTube channels, podcasts, newsletters, social media platforms with monetized followings. All of these are network-based income systems. The asset here is not a physical object or a piece of content alone. It is the relationship between you and a group of people who trust you, follow you, and engage with what you create. Advertising revenue, sponsorships, affiliate commissions, and product sales all flow through this pillar. And once a network reaches a certain size, it generates income across multiple channels simultaneously. Pillar 4. Process-based income. This is income generated by a business system, a set of repeatable processes that deliver value to customers without requiring the owner's constant involvement. A well-run e-commerce store. A service business with a strong team and clear operating procedures. A franchise. A vending machine route. A laundromat. A car wash. These are businesses designed not around the owner's personal output, but around a process that runs whether the owner is present or not. This pillar requires the most upfront work to build correctly, but it also has the highest ceiling because a process can be scaled in ways that personal time never can. Now here's what the most financially sophisticated people understand. These 4 pillars are not mutually exclusive. They are meant to be combined. And when you layer multiple pillars on top of each other, when your rental property income funds the acquisition of intellectual property, which builds a network, which generates affiliate income from process-based businesses, you have constructed something that most people will never build. You have built a financial machine. The layering strategy. How ordinary people build extraordinary systems. Let me walk you through a real-world layering example, because this is where the abstract becomes genuinely exciting. Meet a man named Jerome. Jerome is 41 years old and lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. 5 years ago, Jerome was a regional sales manager earning $92,000 a year. Good money, but entirely dependent on his continued employment. He had no savings worth mentioning, a car loan, and a mortgage. He was, by every conventional measure, doing fine. But he was one job loss away from genuine financial crisis, and he knew it. Jerome started with Pillar 1. He saved aggressively for 18 months, cutting expenses, selling things he didn't need, picking up occasional consulting work, until he had enough for a down payment on a small single-family rental property in a working-class neighborhood outside Charlotte. He bought it for $148,000. After the mortgage, insurance, taxes, and a property management fee, it cleared $340 a month in net cash flow. That wasn't life-changing money, but it was money that arrived whether Jerome went to work or not. And psychologically, that changed everything because now Jerome knew the model worked. While his rental property stabilized, Jerome used his evenings to build Pillar 2. He had spent 15 years in sales and genuinely understood how to build client relationships, overcome objections, and close deals. He turned that knowledge into an online course, a 6-hour training program for early career sales professionals, priced at $197. He sold it through a simple website and promoted it through LinkedIn. In the first year, that course generated just under $14,000. With that extra income, Jerome invested in dividend-paying index funds, adding Pillar 1 assets in a different form. He also started a weekly LinkedIn newsletter about sales strategy, which now has over 22,000 subscribers and earns him between $1,800 and $3,000 a month through sponsorships. That's Pillar 3 activating. Today, Jerome's combined systems generate roughly $6,500 a month outside of his salary. He hasn't quit his job, but he absolutely could. And that option, that freedom to choose, has transformed not just his finances but his entire relationship with his work. He shows up differently. He negotiates differently. He makes decisions differently, because his livelihood no longer depends entirely on any one person's approval. Jerome didn't start with advantages. He started with a decision and a strategy. That's the architecture of cash flow. And it is available to anyone willing to build it one pillar at a time. The foundation principle. Cash flow before capital growth. Here's a distinction that separates people who build lasting financial freedom from people who chase wealth and burn out along the way. There are 2 ways to build net worth. You can chase capital growth, buying assets that appreciate in value over time, hoping to sell them later for a profit. Or you can build cash flow, creating systems that generate regular income right now, month after month, regardless of market conditions. Most financial advice in America focuses almost entirely on capital growth. Buy stocks and hold them. Buy a house and wait for it to appreciate. Contribute to your 401k and let it compound for 30 years. And while none of that advice is wrong, it leaves a critical gap, because capital growth doesn't pay your bills today. It doesn't cover your mortgage when you lose your job. It doesn't give you the freedom to walk away from a toxic workplace this month. Cash flow does. Cash flow is the oxygen of financial freedom. Capital growth is the muscle. You need both, but you cannot survive without oxygen. So the architectural principle this entire system is built on is this. Build cash flow first, then let that cash flow fund your capital growth. Your rental property generates cash flow that you invest in index funds, which grow your capital. Your online course generates cash flow that funds your next property purchase. Your newsletter generates cash flow that you deploy into dividend stocks. Every stream feeds the next one. Every pillar supports the construction of another. That is how the machine works. That is how ordinary people build extraordinary financial lives. Not through one lucky break, but through a deliberate, patient, compounding architecture built one layer at a time. Where you begin, the first brick. So where do you actually start? With everything laid out, 4 pillars, layering strategies, real examples. Where does someone in your situation place the first brick? The answer is simpler than you might expect. You start with your existing knowledge. Before you spend a single dollar. Before you research a single market, before you build a single website, you sit down and make a list of everything you genuinely know how to do well, professionally, personally, practically. Things people ask your advice about. Skills you've spent years developing that other people would genuinely pay to learn or access. That list is your raw material. That list is the foundation of your first system. Because the fastest path from zero to your first cash flow stream is almost always built on something you already have, not something you need to go acquire. The architecture starts there. With what's already in you, you now understand the blueprint. 4 pillars. A layering strategy. A clear principle for sequencing your build. And a starting point that requires nothing more than what you already know. But here's what most people do after they get the blueprint. They get busy. They get excited. They try to build everything at once and end up building nothing completely. In Chapter 4, we're going to solve that problem directly. We're going to talk about the one system rule, why your first cash flow stream demands singular focus, how to identify which pillar fits your specific life right now, and the exact framework for going from idea to your first dollar of non-salary income. Because a blueprint on paper is just a drawing. What turns it into a building is what comes next. Chapter 4. The One System Rule. How to start without drowning in options. Let's be honest about something that happens to almost every person who gets genuinely fired up about building financial freedom. They listen to something like this audiobook, or they read a book about passive income, or they watch a 3-hour deep dive on real estate investing, and they get that electric feeling, that clarity, that sense of finally seeing the path forward. And then they sit down to actually start, and suddenly they're paralyzed all over again. Not because they don't know enough, but because they know too much. They're simultaneously researching rental properties, building a course outline, brainstorming a YouTube channel, reading about dividend investing, looking at vending machine businesses, considering dropshipping, and texting a friend about a potential partnership opportunity. They're consuming everything and building nothing. They're spreading their energy across 10 potential systems and making zero meaningful progress on any single one. This phenomenon has a name in productivity psychology. It's called option paralysis. And in the world of cash flow building, it is absolutely lethal. Because building a system requires something that cannot be divided. It requires sustained, focused, consistent attention over a meaningful period of time. And you cannot give sustained focus to 10 things simultaneously. This is exactly why the first and most important strategic principle of cash flow architecture is what we're calling the one system rule. And it is the single most important concept in this entire audiobook for people who are just getting started. Here's the rule in plain English. Before you build your second system, your first system must be generating consistent, repeatable income. That's it. That's the whole rule. One system, fully built, fully running, consistently producing, before you even begin thinking seriously about the next one. Simple to understand, genuinely difficult to follow. But the people who follow it consistently, they're the ones who actually get free. Why your brain fights the one system rule. Understanding why this rule is so hard to follow is just as important as understanding the rule itself, because if you don't see the trap clearly, you will fall into it repeatedly. Here's what happens inside your mind when you commit to one system and start building it seriously. In the beginning, everything feels exciting and possible. You're energized. You're taking action. Progress feels imminent. But about 3 to 6 weeks in, right around the point where the initial excitement has worn off and the real work has begun, something shifts. The progress feels slower than you expected. The results haven't materialized yet. And right at that precise moment of doubt, your brain does something completely predictable. It starts generating new ideas. Suddenly the rental property you were focused on feels complicated, and you start thinking maybe an online course would be faster. Then the course feels like too much content creation, and someone mentions dropshipping and that sounds simpler. Then a colleague tells you about a guy who made $40,000 flipping sports cards, and now you're on eBay at midnight researching card grading. Psychologists call this shiny object syndrome, and it is not a character flaw. It is a completely natural brain response to discomfort. Your mind, seeking relief from the friction of sustained difficult work, manufactures enthusiasm for alternatives as an escape mechanism. The new idea always looks more promising than the current one, not because it actually is, but because it hasn't been tested yet. And so the cycle continues. You start. You hit friction. You pivot. You start something new. You hit friction again. You pivot again. Months pass. Years pass. And you have a graveyard of half-built ideas and 0 completed systems. That graveyard is not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of focus. And the one system rule is the antidote. The 4-question filter. Choosing your first system. So how do you decide which system to build first? With 4 pillars available and dozens of specific opportunities within each one, how do you cut through the noise and identify the single right starting point for your specific life? You run every candidate idea through 4 questions, and you only commit to the idea that passes all 4. Question 1. Does this system leverage something I already have? This means existing knowledge, existing skills, existing relationships, existing assets, or existing audience. The fastest path to your first dollar of non-salary income is almost always through something you already possess, not something you need to build from scratch. A teacher who monetizes their expertise earns faster than a teacher who tries to learn real estate investing from 0. A mechanic who starts a YouTube channel about car maintenance builds momentum faster than a mechanic who tries to launch a software product. Start with your inventory, not your wish list. Question 2. Can I realistically start this within the next 30 days with the resources I currently have? Not the resources you'll have after saving for a year. Not the resources you'll have once you get that promotion. The resources you have right now, the time, the money, the skills, and the tools currently available to you. If the honest answer is no, the system is wrong for this season of your life. File it for later and find something with a lower barrier to entry. Momentum is your most valuable early asset, and you cannot build momentum without a start. Question 3. Can this system realistically generate at least $500 a month within 6 months of focused effort? Notice the word realistically, not optimistically, not best case scenario. Realistically, given your starting point, your available time, and the specific opportunity you're considering. This threshold matters because $500 a month is enough to prove the model works without being so ambitious that it requires a perfect execution to achieve. It's your first proof of concept, your first evidence that you can build something that pays you outside of a salary. Question 4. Am I genuinely interested enough in this to work on it consistently for 12 months even if the early results are modest? This question is the most important one, and the most frequently skipped. Because no system pays well in the first 90 days. Almost every income stream you will ever build goes through a slow, unsexy, unglamorous early phase where the work is real and the rewards are small. If you're not genuinely interested in the subject matter, if you're doing it purely for the money without any authentic engagement in the work itself, you will quit during that early phase. Every single time. Interest is not a luxury. For the first system, interest is a survival mechanism. Run every idea through these 4 questions. The one that passes all 4 is your first system. Commit to it completely. Build nothing else until it is running and producing consistently. The minimum viable system. Your first 60 days. Once you've chosen your first system through the 4-question filter, the next challenge is how to actually build it without letting the scope of the full vision overwhelm you into inaction. The answer is the minimum viable system, a concept borrowed from the startup world and applied directly to personal cash flow building. A minimum viable system is the smallest, simplest version of your income stream that could realistically generate your first dollar. Not the full vision, not the polished final product. The most stripped down, functional version that proves the concept works. If your first system is freelance consulting, your minimum viable system is not a professional website, a logo, a pricing package, a contract template, and a LinkedIn overhaul. Your minimum viable system is 1 email to 3 people in your network, describing what you can help with and asking if they know anyone who needs that help. If your first system is a rental property, your minimum viable system is not finding the perfect market, the perfect neighborhood, the perfect price point, and the perfect financing structure simultaneously. Your minimum viable system is getting pre-approved for a mortgage and making your first offer on a property that meets a basic cash flow threshold. If your first system is a digital product, your minimum viable system is not a fully produced course with professional video, a branded website, and a complex email marketing funnel. Your minimum viable system is a PDF guide on something you know well, sold through a simple page, promoted to your existing contacts. Let me show you what this looks like in the real world through someone named Keisha, a 36-year-old HR director from Memphis, Tennessee, earning $79,000 a year. Keisha chose her first system based on the 4-question filter, a freelance HR consulting service helping small local businesses set up compliant hiring processes, something she had been doing professionally for 12 years. Her minimum viable system in the first 30 days looked like this. She emailed 8 business owners she already knew, offering a 2-hour HR audit for $250. 3 of them said yes. She earned $750 in her first month. Not life-changing, but life-confirming. She proved the model worked. She proved people would pay for her knowledge. She proved she could generate income outside of her employer. Over the following 4 months, she refined her service, raised her rates, and built a simple referral system. By month 6, she was consistently clearing $2,100 a month from consulting alongside her full salary. That's when she started thinking about her second system, but only then. Only after the first one was running reliably. Keisha didn't start with a grand plan. She started with a small, fast, real action that generated proof. And the proof built the confidence that built the system that built the freedom. Protecting your focus. The art of saying no to good ideas. One of the hardest disciplines of the one system rule is what it requires you to say no to, and how often it requires you to say it. When you are visibly building something, people will bring you ideas. Partners will pitch collaborations. Friends will forward opportunities. Your own mind will generate alternatives at 2 a.m. with suspicious enthusiasm. And many of these ideas will be genuinely good. Not distractions disguised as opportunities. Actual, legitimate, real opportunities that have genuine merit. And you still have to say no to them. At least for now. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in American history, famously described his decision-making process using what he called a two-list system. He would write down his top 25 goals or opportunities. Then he would circle the 5 most important ones. The remaining 20? He called them his avoid at all costs list. not because they were bad ideas, but because they were good enough ideas to consume his attention without being important enough to deserve it. The same principle applies directly to your first cash flow system. Every good idea you say yes to before your first system is running is attention stolen from the thing that will actually set you free. Good ideas are not scarce. Your focused attention is. Protect it like the non-renewable resource it actually is. Your season of singular focus will not last forever. Once the first system is running and producing consistently, you earn the right to layer the next one. Then the next. Then the next. But that layering only works, it only compounds the way Jerome's story in the last chapter showed, when each foundation is fully solid before the next level is added. Build one thing completely, then build the next thing completely. That is how ordinary people build extraordinary financial lives, not in a blaze of simultaneous ambition, but in a deliberate sequence of completed systems, each one stronger than the last. You now have the rule that will protect your focus and your momentum through everything that comes next. One system, fully built, consistently producing, before the second one begins. But here's what nobody talks about when they describe building cash flow systems: the leaks. The quiet, invisible, consistent drains on your financial progress that work against every system you try to build. The habits, the patterns, the unconscious decisions that bleed your resources before they ever have the chance to compound. In Chapter 5, we're going to expose those leaks in detail, because you cannot fill a bucket that has holes in it. And most Americans are walking around with more financial holes than they realize. The question to carry forward: if you ran every opportunity in your life right now through the 4-question filter, which one passes all 4? That answer is your starting point. And your starting point is closer than you've been telling yourself. Chapter 5. Plugging the leaks. Why most Americans are bleeding wealth without knowing it. Here is a question that most financial advisors will never ask you. Not because they don't know the answer, but because the answer is uncomfortable enough to make people defensive. What if the reason you haven't built wealth yet has nothing to do with how much you earn, and everything to do with how much you're quietly, invisibly, consistently losing? Not losing in dramatic ways. Not losing through bad investments or gambling or catastrophic decisions. Losing in the small, normalized, socially acceptable ways that American consumer culture has made almost completely invisible. Losing through patterns so embedded in your daily life that they don't even feel like choices anymore. They just feel like Tuesday. That is what this chapter is about. The leaks. Every cash flow system you build, every rental property, every digital product, every consulting stream, is essentially a bucket designed to collect and hold financial resources. And the speed at which that bucket fills depends on 2 things equally: how much flows in and how much drains out through the holes in the bottom. Most financial content focuses almost entirely on the inflow: how to earn more, how to build more, how to generate more. But if your bucket has significant holes, more inflow just means faster drainage. You can pour water into a colander all day long and never fill it up. So before we go any further into building your cash flow machine, we need to get honest about the leaks. Because plugging even 2 or 3 of them will free up more monthly resources than most people realize. Resources that can be redirected directly into the systems we've been designing together. The invisible tax of lifestyle inflation. The most expensive leak in most American households has a name that sounds almost harmless: lifestyle inflation. Here's how it works. You get a raise. Maybe it's $8,000 a year. Meaningful money, real progress, something to celebrate. And almost immediately, not through any deliberate decision, but through a quiet, gradual, nearly automatic process, your spending expands to absorb it. You upgrade the car because now you can afford the payment. You move to a slightly nicer apartment because the neighborhood feels more appropriate for where you are now. You eat out a little more frequently. You upgrade your wardrobe for the new role. You subscribe to a few more services because each one individually seems reasonable. None of these decisions feels extravagant in isolation. Each one feels justified, even sensible. But collectively, they consume the entire raise, and sometimes more. So despite earning significantly more than you did 3 years ago, you are saving roughly the same amount. Sometimes less. This is not a rare phenomenon. This is the default financial trajectory of the American middle class. A Federal Reserve study found that a significant percentage of Americans earning over $100,000 a year still describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Not because $100,000 is insufficient, but because lifestyle inflation reliably expands to match whatever income is available. The antidote is a principle called lifestyle lag, and it is one of the most powerful wealth-building habits available to anyone at any income level. Lifestyle lag means deliberately delaying the upgrade of your lifestyle when your income increases, and redirecting the difference into your cash flow systems instead. When you get a raise of $500 a month, lifestyle lag means your lifestyle stays exactly the same while that $500 goes directly into a high-yield savings account, an index fund, or a down payment fund for your next asset. You don't feel the raise in your spending. You feel it in your net worth. And over time, that discipline compounds into something that no amount of lifestyle upgrading ever could. The subscription drain. Death by 1,000 monthly charges. Let's talk about something that is quietly bleeding millions of American households every single month. And most people have absolutely no idea how bad it actually is. Pull out your bank statement right now, or do it tonight, as soon as this chapter ends, and count every single recurring monthly charge hitting your account. Every subscription, every membership, every auto-renewal, every service fee, every monthly plan. The average American household currently carries between 20 and 30 active subscriptions at any given time. Streaming services, music platforms, fitness apps, meditation apps, news sites, software tools, cloud storage plans, meal kit deliveries, beauty boxes, gaming services, premium versions of free apps. The list is genuinely staggering when you see it assembled in one place. Now here's the number that will make you pause. Research from financial services companies consistently shows that Americans underestimate their monthly subscription spending by an average of nearly 200%. People think they're spending around $80 a month on subscriptions. The actual average is closer to $220 to $240. That gap, between what you think you're spending and what you're actually spending, is a leak. And across 12 months, that leak represents nearly $1,800 to $2,000 that could have been deployed into your first cash flow system. Think about what Keisha from the last chapter did with her first $750 from consulting. Now imagine having an extra $1,800 a year. Not from earning more, but simply from redirecting money that was already leaving your account on autopilot for services you barely use. The fix here is simple and takes about 45 minutes. Do a full subscription audit. Go through every single recurring charge. For each one, ask a single honest question. If this service disappeared tomorrow, would I notice within a week? If the answer is no, cancel it today. Not eventually. Today. Because every month you delay is another month that money is leaving your system without generating anything in return. The convenience premium. What comfort is actually costing you? America is, without question, the most convenience-oriented consumer culture on the planet. And there is genuine value in convenience. Time is a real resource, and sometimes paying to preserve it makes complete financial sense. But there is a category of convenience spending that has nothing to do with genuine time saving and everything to do with habit, comfort, and the path of least resistance. And in that category, most Americans are paying what we're going to call the convenience premium, the significant markup you pay for the same outcome simply because the easier option was available. Consider food spending. The average American household spends roughly $3,500 to $4,000 per year on restaurant meals and food delivery. And that number has climbed sharply with the rise of delivery apps that add service fees, delivery fees, surge pricing, and tip expectations that can push a $15 meal to $32 before you've touched a fork. Now consider that the average cost of preparing the same meal at home is typically 60 to 70% lower. Across a full year, a household that reduces restaurant and delivery spending by just 40%. Not eliminating it, just reducing it meaningfully, frees up between $1,400 and $1,600 annually. That is a meaningful contribution to an index fund, a rental property down payment, or a digital product launch budget. The same convenience premium shows up in grocery shopping, where impulse purchases and name brand loyalty over equivalent store brand products adds hundreds of dollars annually for zero additional value. It shows up in energy spending, where simple behavioral adjustments and modest smart home investments reduce utility bills by 15 to 20% without any sacrifice in comfort. It shows up in banking, where Americans collectively pay billions of dollars annually in overdraft fees, monthly maintenance fees, and ATM charges that high-yield online banking accounts simply do not charge. None of these leaks individually seems significant, but stacked together across a full calendar year, they represent what financial planners sometimes call phantom income. Money you are already earning but never keeping, because it leaks out through habits you've never consciously examined. The debt drag. When yesterday's decisions tax today's freedom. No conversation about financial leaks is complete without addressing the single most expensive drain in most American households: high-interest consumer debt. According to data from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, total American credit card debt recently surpassed $1 trillion, a number so large it barely feels real. But what makes it personally devastating is not the national figure. It's what it costs at the individual level, month after month, in interest payments that generate absolutely nothing in return. The average American household carrying a credit card balance pays somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800 per year in interest charges alone. Not paying down principal, not building equity, not acquiring assets. Just servicing the cost of past spending decisions, month after month, as a permanent tax on their present income. Here's how to think about this leak in cash flow terms. Paying $150 a month in credit card interest is not just losing $150. It is losing the compounding growth of $150 deployed monthly into an income-generating asset over a period of years. Over 10 years, at a reasonable rate of return, that $150 monthly represents tens of thousands of dollars in lost wealth building capacity. The strategy for addressing this leak is well established but worth stating clearly. First, list every debt you carry with its balance, minimum payment, and interest rate. Then apply what's called the avalanche method, directing every available extra dollar toward the highest interest debt first while maintaining minimum payments on everything else. Once the highest interest debt is eliminated, redirect that payment toward the next highest. The mathematical efficiency of this approach versus making minimum payments across multiple debts is significant, often reducing total interest paid by thousands of dollars and eliminating debt years earlier. As each debt is eliminated, the freed-up cash flow is immediately redirected into your first income system, not back into lifestyle spending. This is the bridge between stopping the drain and starting the build. The audit that changes everything. Here's the practical exercise this chapter is building toward, and this is not optional homework if you're serious about what we've been discussing. Within the next 48 hours, conduct what we're calling a full financial leak audit. This means sitting down with 3 months of bank statements and credit card statements and doing 4 things in sequence. First, identify and categorize every recurring charge. Second, calculate your actual monthly spending on food, convenience services, and entertainment. The real number, not the estimated one. Third, list every debt with its interest rate and monthly cost. Fourth, add up the total monthly outflow from all identified leaks. The subscriptions you don't use, the convenience premium you're paying, the interest charges you're absorbing. For most Americans who do this exercise with genuine honesty, the total is somewhere between $400 and $900 per month in redirectable resources. Money that is already entering your household, already being earned through your labor, but disappearing through holes before it ever has a chance to build anything. Even the conservative end of that range, $400 a month, is $4,800 a year. Invested consistently into an index fund over 10 years at an average market return, that's a meaningful contribution toward financial freedom. Deployed into a down payment fund over 2 years, it's the foundation of your first rental property. Used to fund your first digital product launch, It's more than enough to build something that generates multiples of that investment annually. The leaks are not small. The leaks are, for most people, the difference between building wealth and perpetually feeling like they should be further ahead by now. You've just seen the hidden drain on your financial progress, and more importantly, you now have the tools to stop it. Plug the leaks, redirect the flow, and suddenly the resources for building your first system are not as far away as they seemed an hour ago. But here's what comes next, and this is where things get genuinely exciting. In Chapter 6, we're going to talk about the concept of money multiplication, how to take the resources you've freed up by plugging these leaks and deploy them in the specific sequence that generates the fastest path to your first meaningful passive income stream. Because stopping the drain is powerful. But knowing exactly where to redirect the flow, that's where the real building begins. Carry this question into the next chapter. If you redirected every financial leak in your life right now into a single income building system, how long before that system pays for itself completely? The answer might surprise you, and Chapter 6 is going to show you exactly how to calculate it. Chapter 6. Money Multiplication. How to deploy your resources for maximum cash flow return. There is a fundamental difference between two types of people sitting in roughly the same financial position. Same income, same expenses, same general starting point, who end up in completely different places 5 years down the road. The first person treats every dollar that isn't spoken for as available spending money. They work hard, they earn well, they occasionally save something when there's leftover, and they generally feel like they're doing okay. Right up until the moment something goes wrong and they realize they've been running on a financial treadmill the entire time. Moving constantly. Getting nowhere. The second person treats every dollar that isn't spoken for as a deployment decision. They don't ask, what do I want to spend this on? They ask, where does this dollar create the most return? They think about money not as something to be consumed but as something to be positioned, placed deliberately into structures that will generate more money in return. That shift, from spending to deploying, is the entire foundation of money multiplication. And it is the skill this chapter is designed to build in you permanently. Because here's what the previous chapter made possible. You've identified the leaks, you've plugged the drain, and now there is redirectable cash flow sitting in your financial system that wasn't working for you before. The question is no longer, how do I find the resources? The question is now, what is the most intelligent place to put them? That question has a specific, strategic answer. And we're going to walk through it together right now. The 3 zones of money deployment. Before you deploy a single dollar into any cash flow system, you need to understand the 3 zones that every dollar you own should be categorized into, because the zone determines the deployment strategy, and the deployment strategy determines the return. Zone 1 is your foundation layer. This is the money that protects your ability to build everything else. Your emergency fund, your essential insurance coverage, and your minimum debt obligations. This money is not deployed for growth. It is deployed for stability. Think of it as the concrete foundation of a building. It doesn't generate income directly, but without it, everything built on top of it is vulnerable to collapse. The financial benchmark for Zone 1 is straightforward: 3 to 6 months of essential living expenses held in a high-yield savings account. Not a standard savings account earning 0.01% annually, but a high-yield account earning somewhere between 4 and 5% depending on current rates. This distinction matters more than most people realize. On a $15,000 emergency fund, the difference between a standard savings account and a high-yield account is roughly $600 to $700 in annual interest. Money you earn for simply choosing the right account type. Until Zone 1 is solidly established, every other deployment decision is being made on an unstable foundation. So if your emergency fund is underfunded, a meaningful portion of your redirected leak money goes here first. Not because it's exciting, but because stability is the prerequisite for everything that follows. Zone 2 is your growth layer. This is where your redirected resources begin working actively to generate returns. Zone 2 includes your cash flow system investments, the down payment fund for a rental property, the course creation budget, the advertising spend for your consulting service, the seed capital for your first dividend portfolio. This is the money that is actively engaged in building your income streams. The key principle governing Zone 2 deployment is what financial strategists call return on attention, meaning you deploy your limited resources into the opportunities that generate the highest return not just financially, but relative to the time and mental energy required to manage them. A rental property that generates $400 a month in net cash flow but requires 12 hours a month of active management has a very different return on attention than an index fund that generates $200 a month in dividends and requires zero active management. Both are valuable, but your deployment decisions should always factor in the full cost, financial and temporal, of each option. Zone 3 is your acceleration layer. This is the money that gets deployed once your first cash flow system is running and producing consistently. Money that goes into expanding existing systems, acquiring new assets, and compounding your wealth-building momentum. Zone 3 is where the real multiplication happens, but it is only accessible after Zones 1 and 2 are functioning. Many people try to jump straight to Zone 3 and wonder why their financial life feels chaotic and unstable. The sequence matters as much as the strategy. The deployment sequence, where your money goes first. Now let's get specific about the order of operations for deploying the resources you've freed up, because sequence is everything in money multiplication. Here is the deployment sequence that consistently produces the fastest path to financial freedom for regular Americans starting from a typical middle-class position. Step 1. Eliminate high-interest debt first. Any debt carrying an interest rate above 8% is a guaranteed negative return on every dollar you're not using to eliminate it. Paying off a credit card charging 22% interest is equivalent to earning a guaranteed 22% return on your money. A return that no legitimate investment on earth can match with the same reliability. Before you deploy resources into any growth opportunity, every dollar of high-interest consumer debt needs to be eliminated. This is not emotionally satisfying advice. It doesn't feel like building. But mathematically, it is the highest return deployment decision available to most Americans carrying consumer debt. Step 2. Fund your Zone 1 foundation to the minimum threshold. 3 months of essential expenses in a high-yield account. That's the floor. Not negotiable. Not skippable. Just done. Step 3. Begin your first Zone 2 deployment. Once the foundation is stable and the high interest drain is eliminated, every available redirected dollar goes into building your first cash flow system. This might mean accumulating a down payment fund. It might mean funding a course creation project. It might mean building an advertising budget for your freelance service. Whatever your first system is, determined by the 4-question filter from Chapter 4, this is where the resources go. Consistently. Automatically. Before any other discretionary spending decision is made. The word automatically matters enormously here. Behavioral economics research consistently shows that people save and invest dramatically more when the process is automatic rather than intentional. When you have to actively decide each month to transfer money into your building fund, your decision-making is vulnerable to mood, competing priorities, and short-term thinking. When the transfer happens automatically the day after your paycheck arrives, before you've had a chance to spend that money on anything else, it happens every single time without resistance. Set up the automatic transfer today. Not when you finish the audiobook. Today. The multiplication mindset. Thinking in returns, not amounts. Here's where most people's financial thinking breaks down, and it breaks down in a very specific and very fixable way. Most Americans think about money in terms of absolute amounts. I have $500 to spare this month. I saved $3,000 this year. I got a $10,000 bonus. These are amounts. And amounts on their own tell you almost nothing useful about what your money is actually doing for you. The multiplication mindset thinks differently. It thinks in returns and time horizons. Not, I have $500, but, I have $500 that I can deploy at what return over what period to generate what outcome. Let me show you the practical difference through a real example. Consider 2 women, both 32 years old, both living in Denver, Colorado, both with $500 a month in redirectable resources after plugging their financial leaks. The first woman, Sandra, thinks in amounts. She sees $500 and it feels small. Not enough to do anything meaningful with, not enough to buy a rental property, not enough to make a real dent in anything. So she leaves it in her checking account where it slowly gets absorbed by lifestyle spending. She tells herself she'll start investing when she has more. She's been telling herself that for 4 years. The second woman, Maria, thinks in returns. She sees $500 and immediately asks, what is the highest return deployment for this money right now, given my current system building stage? She's in step 3 of the deployment sequence, building toward her first rental property down payment. She transfers $500 automatically into a high-yield savings account on the first of every month. Here's what the math produces over time. After 12 months, Maria has $6,000, plus approximately $280 in interest from the high-yield account. After 24 months, she has $12,560. After 30 months, 2.5 years, she has just over $15,700. At $15,700, Maria has enough for a meaningful down payment contribution on a starter investment property in several American markets, particularly in the Midwest and South where entry-level investment properties remain accessible to first-time landlords. She has transformed $500 monthly, money that was previously disappearing through lifestyle leaks, into a tangible, income-generating asset. Sandra, over the same 30 months, has exactly what she started with, which is to say, nothing beyond her salary. Because amounts without deployment decisions are just numbers that disappear. The multiplication mindset is not about having more money. It is about doing something deliberate and intelligent with the money you already have. Leverage, the multiplier that most people fear and rich people use. No chapter on money multiplication is complete without an honest conversation about leverage, because leverage is, without question, the single most powerful tool in wealth building and also the most misunderstood. At its core, leverage means using other people's money, in the form of debt, to acquire assets that generate returns greater than the cost of the debt itself. It is the mechanism behind virtually every significant fortune built in American real estate, business ownership, and commercial investment. Here's a simple illustration that makes the power of leverage undeniable. Imagine you have $20,000 in cash. Option 1. You invest it in an index fund that returns 10% annually. After 1 year, you have $22,000. You earn $2,000 on your $20,000, a 10% return. Option 2. You use that $20,000 as a down payment on a $100,000 rental property, using $80,000 of the bank's money through a mortgage. The property generates $800 a month in gross rent. After the mortgage payment, taxes, insurance, and a maintenance reserve, it nets $450 a month, $5,400 annually. That is a 27% cash-on-cash return on your actual $20,000 invested. Nearly 3 times the return of the unleveraged option, using the same $20,000. This is why real estate has historically been the primary vehicle through which middle-class Americans have crossed into genuine wealth. Not because property always appreciates dramatically, though it often does, but because leverage amplifies the return on your actual invested capital in ways that no unleveraged investment can match. The fear of leverage is understandable. Debt feels dangerous, and used irresponsibly, it absolutely is. But the wealthy do not avoid leverage. They use it carefully, deliberately, and only in situations where the asset's income reliably exceeds the cost of the debt. That discipline, the line between intelligent leverage and reckless debt, is what separates wealth-building tools from wealth-destroying traps. Your monthly deployment dashboard. Here is the practical framework to take away from this chapter and implement immediately. Your personal monthly deployment dashboard. Every month, when your income arrives, money flows in a specific, predetermined sequence before any discretionary spending decisions are made. First, essential fixed expenses are covered. mortgage or rent, utilities, insurance, minimum debt payments. Second, your automatic Zone 1 contribution transfers if the fund is still being built. Third, your automatic Zone 2 system building transfer moves to your designated building account. Fourth, high-interest debt receives its accelerated payment beyond the minimum. What remains after these 4 automatic movements is your available discretionary spending. Money you can use however genuinely serves your life, without guilt, because everything important has already been handled. This structure transforms your financial life from reactive to proactive. From hoping there's something left at the end of the month to engineering the outcome you want from the beginning of it. Money multiplication is not magic. It is not luck. It is not reserved for people with MBA degrees or inherited wealth. It is a sequence of deliberate decisions made consistently over time, and every single component of that sequence is available to you right now with the resources you currently have. You now understand how to deploy your resources strategically, in the right sequence, through the right zones with the right mindset. You've seen how $500 a month becomes a down payment, how leverage amplifies returns, and how an automated system makes the right decision happen every time without relying on willpower. But here's what most people building cash flow systems eventually run into, and it stops far too many of them just when real momentum is starting to build. In Chapter 7, we're going to talk about scaling, what to do once your first system is running, how to grow it intelligently without breaking it, and how to identify the precise moment when you've earned the right to start building your second stream. Because the first system proves the concept, but the second system, that's where compounding truly begins. Carry this into Chapter 7. What is the one deployment decision you've been delaying? And what would change in your financial life if you made it this week? That question has an answer. And the next chapter is going to give you the framework to act on it. Chapter 7. The Scaling Blueprint. How to grow your first system without breaking it. There is a moment in every cash flow builder's journey that feels absolutely extraordinary, and simultaneously, completely terrifying. It's the moment your first system starts working. The rent check arrives. The course makes its first 10 sales in a single week. The consulting inquiry comes in from someone you've never met through a referral you didn't engineer. The dividend deposit hits your account on a Tuesday morning while you were sitting in a meeting thinking about something else entirely. And in that moment, that genuinely electric moment when you realize the model actually works, that money can actually move toward you without your direct daily effort producing it, something interesting happens in your brain. You want more. Immediately. Faster. Bigger. You start thinking about the second property before the first one is fully stabilized. You start designing the second course before the first one has a consistent sales system. You start imagining a media company before your newsletter has found its audience. You go from patient, focused builder to ambitious, impatient expander almost overnight. And in doing so, you create the conditions for dismantling the very thing you just spent months building. This is the scaling trap. And it catches more cash flow builders at this exact stage than at any other point in the journey. This chapter is about how to avoid it, and how to scale your first system intelligently, sustainably, and in a sequence that multiplies your results instead of fragmenting them. What scaling actually means, and what it doesn't. Let's start with a definition, because the word scaling gets used loosely in financial and business content in ways that often create more confusion than clarity. Scaling a cash flow system does not mean simply doing more of what you're already doing. It does not mean working harder, longer, or more intensely within the same structure. Doing more of the same thing produces more of the same result, but it also produces more of the same time investment, the same energy expenditure, and the same ceiling on what's possible. True scaling means engineering your system to produce more output with proportionally less input. It means identifying the specific levers in your system that, when pulled, multiply results without multiplying the effort required to generate them. Think about the difference between a freelance consultant who scales by taking on more clients personally, trading more time for more money, versus a consultant who scales by developing a productized service, hiring a junior team member, and creating a delivery process that doesn't require their personal involvement in every engagement. Both are generating more revenue, but only one is building a system that can grow beyond the limits of their individual time and energy. That distinction, between scaling through more effort and scaling through better architecture, is the entire difference between a self-employed person with a demanding job they created for themselves and a business owner with an asset that generates income independently. The 3 signals that tell you your system is ready to scale. Here's the question most people get wrong at this stage. They try to scale too early. They see initial traction and immediately treat it as validation that the system is ready for expansion, when in reality, early traction is just proof of concept, not proof of stability. Before you scale anything, your first system needs to be demonstrating 3 specific signals, consistently, not occasionally. Signal 1. Consistent monthly output. Your system is generating income every month. Not in peaks and valleys, but in a pattern that is reasonably predictable. This doesn't mean the number is identical every month. It means the floor of what the system produces has been established and is reliable. For a rental property, this might mean 3 consecutive months of fully occupied, on-time rent payments and predictable expense management. For a digital product, this might mean consistent weekly sales through an established traffic source. For a consulting service, this means a stable roster of retainer clients rather than a feast or famine project cycle. Consistent output means the system has found its rhythm, and rhythm is what you scale, not chaos. Signal 2. Documented process. You can write down, step by step, exactly how your system operates. How clients find you, how value is delivered, how money is collected, how problems are resolved. If you cannot document the process, you don't yet fully understand it. And if you don't fully understand it, you cannot hand components of it to other people, tools, or automation without things breaking. Documentation is not bureaucracy. It is the translation of your personal knowledge into a transferable operating system. Every minute you spend documenting your current system is an hour saved when you begin to scale it. Signal 3. Positive unit economics. The system is generating more per unit, per client, per property, per product sale, than it costs to operate and deliver. This sounds obvious, but an alarming number of early-stage systems are actually operating at a loss or at break-even when all costs are honestly accounted for, including the value of the builder's time. Before scaling, you need to know your actual numbers. Revenue minus all expenses, including a fair valuation of your own time at your market rate. If that number is positive and growing, the economics supports scaling. If it's not, scaling will only amplify the problem. The 4 levers of intelligent scaling. Once your system is demonstrating all 3 signals consistently, you have 4 specific levers available for scaling it intelligently, and the order in which you pull them matters enormously. Lever 1. Optimization. Before you add anything new to your system, you squeeze more performance out of what already exists. You look at every component of the process and ask, where is there friction? Where are conversions lower than they should be? Where is money being left on the table through pricing that's too low, delivery that's too slow, or customer experience that's merely acceptable when it could be genuinely excellent? For a rental property, optimization might mean a modest renovation that justifies a higher rental rate while attracting longer-term, higher-quality tenants, improving both revenue and stability simultaneously. For a digital product, optimization might mean split-testing different price points and discovering that a $197 product sells equally well at $297 with the right framing. For a consulting service, optimization might mean transitioning from hourly billing to a retainer model, stabilizing your income while delivering more predictable value to clients. Optimization is the highest return, lowest risk scaling lever available. It requires no new capital, no new audience, and no new infrastructure. It simply extracts more value from what you've already built. Lever 2. Automation. Every manual, repetitive task in your system is a candidate for automation. And automation is where your time gets returned to you in meaningful quantities as your system matures. Email sequences that nurture leads automatically. Scheduling tools that book client calls without your involvement. property management software that handles maintenance requests, rent collection reminders, and financial reporting. Payment processors that deliver digital products instantly without any manual fulfillment. The goal of automation is not to remove the human element entirely. It's to remove your personal involvement from every task that doesn't require your unique judgment or expertise. Every hour that automation reclaims from manual system operation is an hour that can be invested in building your next stream. Lever 3. Delegation. Once automation has been maximized, the remaining manual tasks in your system that still require human judgment are candidates for delegation. Hiring, contracting, or partnering with people who can handle those components more efficiently than you can while you focus on the higher value decisions that only you can make. For many people, this lever carries the most psychological resistance, because delegation requires trusting someone else with something you built, and it requires spending money on team members before the return on that investment is fully visible. But delegation is the lever that removes the ceiling entirely. A system that depends entirely on your personal involvement can only grow as far as your personal capacity. A system with a capable team around it can grow indefinitely. Lever 4. Replication. This is the lever most people think of first, and the reason it comes last is intentional. Replication means taking your optimized, automated, delegated system and building a second version of it alongside the first. A second rental property. A second digital product for a related audience. A second consulting retainer client base in an adjacent industry. Replication multiplies your results, but only if what you're replicating is already running cleanly and efficiently. Replicating a messy, manual, owner-dependent system just creates two messy systems. Replicating an optimized, automated, well-documented system creates compounding wealth. The real-world scaling timeline. What realistic progress actually looks like. Let's ground all of this in a real timeline, because one of the most damaging things financial content does is imply that scaling happens faster than it actually does, setting expectations that lead to discouragement when the reality is simply that good things take the time they take. Think about a man named Carlos, 39 years old, based in San Antonio, Texas, working as a civil engineer earning $96,000 a year. Carlos built his first cash flow system, a digital course on structural engineering exam preparation, over a period of about 4 months in his evenings and weekends. In month 1 through month 4, Carlos built the course, created a simple website, and began promoting it through LinkedIn and a small YouTube channel. Revenue in this phase was essentially zero. This is the building phase. It feels like nothing is happening because the output hasn't started yet. In month 5, the course made its first consistent sales, averaging about $1,400 a month. Carlos entered optimization. He tested different price points, improved his course landing page based on feedback, and added a money-back guarantee that increased conversion meaningfully. Monthly revenue climbed to $2,100 by month 7. In months 8 through 10, Carlos focused on automation, setting up email sequences, automating course delivery, and creating a simple affiliate program that incentivized past students to refer new ones. His active involvement in running the course dropped from roughly 10 hours a week to about 3 hours. By month 12, the course was generating $2,800 a month, with Carlos spending approximately 2 to 3 hours weekly maintaining and updating it. That's when he began replication, designing a second course for a different engineering certification. He launched it 6 months later, and within 3 months it was generating an additional $1,600 a month. 22 months after his first course sale, Carlos's 2 courses generate a combined $4,400 a month. Money that arrives whether he's at work, on vacation, or asleep. He has since begun funding a rental property down payment with a portion of that income, moving toward his first asset-based pillar alongside his intellectual property pillar. Carlos didn't build an empire overnight. He built one system correctly, scaled it through the 4 levers in the right sequence, and then replicated that success deliberately. That timeline, unglamorous, patient, and compounding, is exactly what real financial freedom looks like in the real world. Protecting the system while you scale. One final principle deserves its own moment before we close this chapter. because it is the most frequently overlooked aspect of scaling and the one that causes the most damage when ignored. As your system grows, the risks associated with it grow proportionally. A rental property that generates $400 a month needs proper insurance, a maintenance reserve, and a legally sound lease agreement. A digital product business generating $3,000 a month needs proper business structure, liability protection, and tax strategy. A consulting practice with retainer clients needs contracts, intellectual property protections, and clear service agreements. Scaling without protecting is building without insuring. It creates systems that are vulnerable to exactly the kinds of disruptions: legal disputes, tax surprises, liability claims, market changes, that can eliminate years of careful building in a very short time. As your systems grow, the investment in proper legal structure, accounting support, and insurance coverage is not overhead, it is infrastructure. It is the difference between a system that survives long enough to compound and one that gets dismantled by a problem that proper protection would have prevented entirely. You now have the blueprint for scaling your first system without breaking it. The 3 signals, the 4 levers, the realistic timeline, and the protection principles that keep what you build safe as it grows. But here's what we haven't talked about yet, and it might be the most important conversation in this entire audiobook for where most Americans actually are right now. Chapter 8 is going to tackle something that sits at the intersection of psychology and strategy, the concept of financial identity. Who you believe you are determines what financial decisions you will actually follow through on. And for many people, the real ceiling on their wealth building is not knowledge, not resources, and not opportunity. It is an identity that was formed long before they understood any of this. Carry this question into Chapter 8. Do you actually believe, at the deepest level, that building this kind of life is genuinely possible for someone like you? Your honest answer to that question will tell you more about your financial future than any strategy, system, or blueprint ever could. Chapter 8. The Identity Shift. Becoming the person who builds wealth automatically. Let's do something different at the start of this chapter. Before we talk about strategy, before we talk about systems, before we talk about any of the practical mechanics of building wealth, let's talk about you. Specifically, let's talk about the story you carry about who you are in relation to money. Because here's something that 15 chapters worth of financial strategy cannot fix on its own. You will not consistently do what your identity does not support. Read that again, because it is the most important sentence in this entire audiobook. You will not consistently do what your identity does not support. You can know every strategy in this book perfectly. You can understand cash flow architecture, deployment sequences, scaling levers, and leverage mechanics with complete intellectual clarity. You can feel genuinely inspired after every chapter. And then quietly, gradually, almost invisibly, you will drift back toward the behaviors, the decisions, and the financial patterns that feel like you. Not because you're weak, not because you don't want better, but because human beings are not primarily driven by what they know. They are driven by who they believe they are. And until the story you carry about your financial identity changes at its foundation, every strategy in the world is working against that current rather than with it. This chapter is about changing that story permanently. Where your financial identity came from. Your financial identity, the deep, largely unconscious set of beliefs you carry about what you deserve, what's possible for you, and what kind of person you fundamentally are in relation to money, was not formed by anything you consciously chose. It was formed in childhood, in the household you grew up in the conversations about money that happened around the dinner table, or the arguments that happened because of it, in the way your parents talked about wealthy people, about debt, about risk, about ambition, in the neighborhood you grew up in and the unspoken ceiling it placed on your expectations. In every moment you were told, directly or indirectly, what kind of financial life was realistic for someone like you. Research in developmental psychology consistently shows that core money beliefs are largely formed before the age of 7 years old. Before you understood compound interest, before you knew what a mortgage was, before you'd ever held a job or earned a paycheck. the fundamental architecture of your financial identity was already being built from the raw material of your environment. For many Americans, particularly those who grew up in working-class or lower-middle-class households, that architecture contains beliefs that feel like facts but are actually inherited limitations. Things like, rich people are greedy or dishonest. Money doesn't grow on trees. We're not the kind of family that has investments. Playing it safe is smarter than taking risks. Wanting too much is ungrateful. These beliefs don't announce themselves as limiting. They disguise themselves as wisdom, as humility, as realism, and they operate quietly in the background of every financial decision you make, steering you away from opportunities that feel presumptuous, back toward patterns that feel familiar, even when familiar means staying stuck. The identity gap, the distance between where you are and where you're going. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called the identity gap, the distance between your current self-concept and the self-concept required to consistently produce the outcomes you want. For most people building toward financial freedom, this gap is significant. On one side sits their current identity: I'm someone who works hard for a paycheck, manages money carefully, and hopes things work out. On the other side sits the identity required: I'm someone who builds systems, acquires assets, thinks in cash flow, and makes money work harder than I do. The gap between those two identities is not bridged by information. It is bridged by identity-consistent action, by behaving like the second person repeatedly until the brain updates its self-concept to match the behavior. This is the counterintuitive truth about identity change that most people get completely backwards. They wait to feel like a different person before acting like one. They wait until they feel confident before making the investment. They wait until they feel like an entrepreneur before starting the business. They wait until they feel like a landlord before buying the property. But the feeling never comes first. The action comes first. The feeling follows. Every time you make a financial decision that aligns with the identity you're building, every automatic transfer you set up, every lease agreement you sign, every course you publish, every investment you make, you are casting a vote for the new version of yourself. And votes accumulate. And accumulated votes become a new identity. James Clear, in his research on habit formation, describes this process with remarkable precision. Identity change is not a single dramatic moment of transformation. It is the slow accumulation of evidence, gathered through consistent action, that eventually reaches a tipping point where the new self-concept becomes undeniable. Where you stop saying, I'm trying to become someone who builds wealth, and start saying, I'm someone who builds wealth. Quietly, naturally, as a statement of fact rather than a statement of aspiration. The 5 identity statements that wealthy builders actually carry. Let me give you something concrete to work with, because identity shifting without specific targets is just motivational thinking without traction. Here are 5 core identity statements that financially free people carry as fundamental truths about themselves. Statements that directly contradict the inherited limitations that keep most people stuck in the salary system. As you read each one, notice where you feel resistance. Because resistance is the exact location of the identity gap. Statement 1, my income is not limited by my time. Wealthy builders do not accept the premise that the hours they work determine the money they earn. They believe, and more importantly, they act as though, income is a function of value delivered and systems built, not hours traded. Every time you work on a system outside your salary hours, you are voting for this identity. Statement 2, I make money work harder than I work. This statement directly challenges the deeply American cultural belief that hard work alone is the path to prosperity. Hard work is necessary, but it is not sufficient. The wealthy work hard early to build systems that then work continuously on their behalf. Believing this is not laziness. It is leverage. Statement 3, I am comfortable with calculated risk. Most people raised in financial scarcity develop a deep, almost physical aversion to risk, because in their formative environment, risk was genuinely dangerous. But there is an enormous difference between reckless risk and calculated risk. Calculated risk is what every successful investor, entrepreneur, and cash flow builder practices. It means assessing probabilities, understanding downside scenarios, preparing adequately, and then making the move. Wealth is not built by avoiding risk. It is built by managing it intelligently. Statement 4. I invest in assets, not just experiences. This does not mean never enjoying your money. It means that before discretionary spending decisions are made, the investment decision has already been automated. It means that your default response to available money is, where does this get deployed? Rather than, what do I want to buy? Statement 5. My financial ceiling is not predetermined. Perhaps the most powerful and most difficult of all 5 statements, particularly for people whose family history, socioeconomic background, or past financial mistakes have created a deep sense of a fixed financial ceiling. The truth is that financial ceilings are not structural. They are psychological. They are made of beliefs, not bricks. And beliefs, unlike bricks, can be changed. The environment architecture. Building a world that supports your new identity. Here is something that most personal development content completely ignores when discussing identity change. You cannot reliably sustain a new identity in an old environment. Your environment, the people around you, the content you consume, the conversations you participate in, the spaces you inhabit, is constantly sending signals about who you are and what's normal for someone like you. If your environment is built around a salary mindset, it will pull you back towards salary mindset behavior even when your conscious intentions are pointing in a different direction. This is not a criticism of your current environment. The people in your life are not obstacles. They are simply reflections of the world you've been living in. But building a new financial identity requires deliberately engineering a new environment that supports and reinforces the identity you're constructing. In practical terms, this means several things. It means finding one community, online, local, or professional, of people who are actively building cash flow systems and having genuine conversations about the process. It means replacing a meaningful portion of the entertainment content you consume with content that normalizes financial building. Podcasts, books, channels, and communities where asset acquisition, system building, and financial independence are simply the baseline conversation. It means being thoughtful about the financial conversations you have with the people closest to you, not dismissing or abandoning those relationships, but recognizing that well-meaning people who are still operating from a salary mindset will often, unconsciously, discourage the decisions that move you forward. Not out of malice, out of the same fear that once held you back. Their ceiling does not have to be yours. And it means creating physical environments that reinforce your new identity. A reading space with books about financial building. A financial dashboard you see regularly that tracks your system building progress. Visual reminders of the goals you're working toward that make the abstract concrete and the distant feel present. Environment doesn't just support identity. At a certain point, environment becomes identity. The person who surrounds themselves with builders becomes a builder. The person who fills their mind with wealth-building thinking starts thinking in wealth-building terms automatically. The shift becomes less effortful over time because the environment is doing much of the work. The moment you become someone different. I want to tell you about a specific kind of moment, because if you stay on this path, you will experience it. And when you do, I want you to recognize it for what it is. It will happen sometime after you've built your first system. After the first consistent income checks have arrived. After you've made your first reinvestment decision. After you've had a few conversations with people who are further along the path and realized you can follow their thinking without feeling lost. Someone in your life, a colleague, a family member, a friend, will make an offhand comment about money. Something about how you have to work hard for everything, or how risky it is to try anything outside a stable job, or how the system is rigged against regular people. And you will listen to them, you will genuinely hear them, and you will realize that you no longer fully believe what they're saying. Not because you've become arrogant or dismissive of their experience, but because you have evidence now. Personal, specific, undeniable evidence that the system can work differently. That cash flows toward you from things you built. That your financial life is not entirely determined by someone else's payroll decisions. That moment, quiet, internal, almost private, is the moment the identity shift is complete. That is the moment you stop performing the identity of a wealth builder and simply become one. Everything in this chapter has been building toward that moment for you, and every chapter before this one has been laying the foundation that makes it possible. You've just done some of the deepest work in this entire audiobook. Not strategy work, identity work. The kind of work that changes not just what you do with money, but who you are in relationship to it. But here's what comes next, and it might be the most practically urgent chapter for where most Americans are sitting right now. Chapter 9 is going to address something that quietly destroys more wealth-building momentum than almost anything else: the tax trap. Most Americans are overpaying their taxes significantly, not through illegal means, but through a simple lack of knowledge about the legal structures and strategies that business owners and investors use to keep dramatically more of what they earn. Carry this into the next chapter. Every dollar you overpay in taxes is a dollar that never makes it into your system. And the amount most people are overpaying? It might be the most expensive number you've never calculated. Chapter 9. The Tax Trap. How the wealthy keep more of every dollar they earn. You will never think about your financial life the same way again. Take your gross annual salary. Now subtract your federal income tax. Subtract your state income tax. Subtract your Social Security contribution. Subtract your Medicare contribution. For most working Americans earning between $50,000 and $150,000 a year, the total tax burden, federal, state, and payroll combined, consume somewhere between 28 and 38 cents of every dollar earned. That means if you earn $80,000 a year, you are keeping somewhere between $49,600 and $57,600 of it. The rest, between $22,400 and $30,400, goes to various forms of taxation before you've paid a single bill, bought a single grocery, or made a single investment decision. Now here is the part that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. A business owner earning the same $80,000 in net income, using entirely legal IRS-approved tax strategies that are openly available to anyone operating as a business entity, might pay less than half of what you're paying in taxes on that same income. Not through illegal schemes. Not through offshore accounts. Not through anything shady or risky or complicated beyond what a competent accountant can handle. Simply by understanding the rules of the game that the tax code was actually written to support, and using them. The American tax system is not designed equally. It is designed with specific advantages built in for people who own businesses, invest in real estate, and build assets. These advantages are not hidden. They are written directly into the tax code, available to anyone who understands them. The problem is that most Americans spend their entire working lives as employees, and employees receive almost none of them. This chapter is about changing that. Not by giving you legal advice. Always consult a qualified tax professional for your specific situation, but by opening your eyes to the landscape of what's possible, so that you can have an intelligent conversation with the right professional and stop leaving thousands of dollars on the table every single year. Why employees pay the most and own the least. The fundamental reason employees pay disproportionately high taxes compared to business owners and investors comes down to one core principle embedded in the American tax code. The government rewards economic behavior it wants to encourage. The government wants people to create jobs, invest in real estate, fund businesses, develop communities, and take the kinds of economic risks that drive growth and employment. So it built the tax code to make those activities financially advantageous. It reduced the tax burden on income generated through business ownership and investment. It created deductions, credits, depreciation allowances, and preferential tax rates specifically for people who participate in those economic activities. Employees, on the other hand, receive their income in the most heavily taxed form that exists in the American system. W-2 wages. Before a single dollar of that paycheck reaches your bank account, payroll taxes have already been extracted automatically. You have almost no ability to deduct the expenses associated with earning that income. You cannot depreciate your own labor. You cannot write off your commute, your professional wardrobe, your home office, or your continuing education against your W-2 income in any meaningful structural way. The tax code is not a neutral document. It is a behavior-shaping instrument, and it was written by people who understood business and investment far better than they understood employment. Once you understand this, the question stops being, how do I earn more? And starts being, how do I restructure how I earn, so that more of what I earn actually stays with me? The business owner advantage. Deductions that change everything. The single most powerful tax advantage available to anyone building cash flow systems is the ability to operate as a legitimate business entity, and with it, access to a world of deductions that employees are almost entirely excluded from. When you operate a business, even a small one, even a side business alongside your full-time employment, the IRS allows you to deduct ordinary and necessary business expenses from your taxable income before calculating what you owe. This is a fundamentally different relationship with the tax code than the one you have as an employee. Let's make this concrete. Imagine you have launched a consulting practice as your first cash flow system, something that generates $2,500 a month in revenue alongside your regular salary. As a sole proprietor or LLC, here is a partial list of expenses that may be legitimately deductible against that business income. Your home office space proportional to its square footage, your phone and internet bill proportional to business use, your computer and equipment, your professional development courses and books, your travel to client meetings, your subscriptions to professional tools and software, your marketing and advertising spend, your accounting and legal fees, and meals with clients discussed for legitimate business purposes. None of these deductions are aggressive or risky. They are standard IRS-approved business deductions that reduce your taxable business income, and therefore reduce the taxes you owe on that income. The same expenses that exist in your life anyway, the phone you're already paying for, the internet you're already using, the home office space you're already occupying, become tax-advantaged when they are genuinely associated with a legitimate business activity. A qualified tax professional can help you identify every deduction legitimately available to your specific situation. The point here is not to give you a precise deduction list. It's to help you understand that the moment you move from purely employee income to business income, your relationship with the tax code changes dramatically and advantageously. Real estate and the depreciation secret. If the business deduction advantage is powerful, the real estate depreciation advantage is genuinely extraordinary, and it is one of the least understood wealth-building tools available to American investors. Here's how it works in plain language. When you own a rental property, the IRS allows you to deduct a portion of the building's value from your taxable income every year. Not because the building is actually losing value necessarily, but because the tax code treats physical structures as assets that wear out over time. This deduction is called depreciation, and for residential rental properties, the IRS allows you to depreciate the building's value over 27.5 years. Let's run real numbers. You purchase a rental property for $180,000. The land is valued at $30,000, which means the depreciable building value is $150,000. Divide $150,000 by 27.5 years and you get approximately $5,454 in annual depreciation that you can deduct from your rental income. Now here's where it gets genuinely remarkable. If your rental property generates $18,000 in gross annual rent, and your operating expenses, mortgage interest, insurance, property taxes, maintenance, and management, total $12,000, your actual cash flow is $6,000 for the year. Without depreciation, you'd potentially owe taxes on that $6,000 in income. But with the $5,454 depreciation deduction applied, your taxable rental income drops to approximately $546 for the entire year. You collected $6,000 in real cash. You pay taxes on $546. The depreciation deduction has essentially sheltered nearly all of your cash flow from taxation. Entirely legally, entirely by the rules. This is precisely why real estate has historically been the primary vehicle through which American middle-class families have built generational wealth. Not just because properties appreciate and rents rise, but because the tax treatment of real estate income is extraordinarily favorable compared to almost any other income type available to regular investors. The retirement account advantage. Tax-deferred compounding. Here's another dimension of the tax landscape that most employees are dramatically underutilizing. Not because the tools are unavailable, but because nobody explained them clearly enough to inspire urgency. Traditional 401k and IRA contributions reduce your taxable income in the year you make them, dollar for dollar, up to annual contribution limits. This means that every dollar you contribute to a traditional retirement account is a dollar the government doesn't tax this year. You get the full dollar working and compounding for you, rather than the 72 cents or 65 cents that would remain after taxes if it came to you as regular income first. But here's the dimension that business owners access that most employees don't. The solo 401k, available to self-employed individuals and small business owners with no full-time employees beyond themselves and a spouse. The solo 401k allows contribution limits that are dramatically higher than a standard employer 401k, up to $66,000 annually in combined employee and employer contributions as of recent tax years, compared to the $22,500 employee-only limit of a traditional workplace plan. For someone building a side business generating $50,000 or more annually, the ability to shelter a significant portion of that income through a solo 401k represents thousands of dollars in immediate tax savings. Money that compounds inside the retirement account tax-deferred for decades, while also reducing the current year tax bill substantially. Again, these are not aggressive strategies. These are standard tools written directly into the tax code, used by millions of American business owners and investors every single year. The only reason most employees don't access them is that nobody explained them clearly and connected them directly to the cash flow building journey. The S-corporation strategy, reducing self-employment tax. For cash flow builders whose side business has grown to generate meaningful income, roughly $40,000 or more annually, there is one additional tax strategy worth understanding at a conceptual level before discussing with a qualified accountant. When you operate as a sole proprietor or single-member LLC, all of your business net income is subject to self-employment tax, currently 15.3% on the first $160,200 of earnings. This covers both the employer and employee portions of Social Security and Medicare. On $60,000 of business income, that's approximately $9,180 in self-employment tax alone, before a single dollar of income tax is calculated. An S-corporation election changes this structure. As an S-corp owner, you pay yourself a reasonable salary, subject to payroll taxes, and take the remaining business profit as a distribution, which is not subject to self-employment tax. On $60,000 of business income, if you pay yourself a reasonable salary of $35,000 and take $25,000 as a distribution, you pay self-employment taxes only on the $35,000 salary portion, potentially saving $3,000 to $4,000 annually in self-employment taxes alone. There are costs and administrative requirements associated with S-corp elections, payroll processing, additional accounting fees, and state-specific considerations. But for businesses generating meaningful income, the tax savings consistently outweigh the administrative costs, often by a significant margin. The specific numbers matter less here than the principle. As your cash flow systems grow, the tax strategy around them deserves professional attention proportional to the income being generated. An accountant who specializes in small business and investment taxation is not an overhead expense. They are a return-generating investment. The one action this chapter demands. Every chapter in this audiobook has given you something to think about and something to do. This chapter's action item is the most financially urgent one in the entire book. Find a CPA or tax professional who specializes in small business and real estate taxation. Not a general tax preparer who processes W-2 returns efficiently, but someone who actively advises business owners and investors on legal tax minimization strategies. Schedule a consultation. Bring your current tax return, your income sources, and a clear description of the cash flow systems you're building or planning to build. Ask them directly, given my situation, what legal tax strategies am I currently not using that could reduce my tax burden? Then listen carefully to the answer, because that answer, implemented consistently over the next several years, will likely be worth more to your financial freedom journey than almost any other single conversation you will ever have. The wealthy don't pay less in taxes because they cheat. They pay less because they learned the rules, hired people who knew them deeply, and structured their financial lives to take full advantage of every legal provision available to them. Now you know the rules exist. Your only remaining job is to start using them. You have just seen the tax landscape clearly, possibly for the first time in your entire financial life. The advantages are real. The strategies are legal. The savings are significant. And every dollar you stop overpaying in taxes is a dollar that flows directly into your cash flow systems instead. There is one chapter remaining, and it is the most important one, because in Chapter 10, we are not going to introduce anything new. We are going to do something far more powerful. We are going to bring everything together. Every concept, every strategy, every mindset shift, every system, every lever, every identity statement, assembled into a complete picture of what your financial life looks like when all of this is working together simultaneously. Chapter 10 is not a summary. It is a vision, a destination. The answer to the question you've been carrying since the very first words of this audiobook. What does the architect's life actually feel like? And how close are you right now to living it? Chapter 10. The Architect's Life. Building a future that pays you forever. Not just to the final chapter of this audiobook, though that matters because most people who press play on something like this never make it to the end. They listen for 20 minutes, feel inspired, get distracted, and go back to their regular life without anything permanently changing. But you stayed. You listened through the psychology and the mechanics, through the mindset shifts and the practical frameworks, through the uncomfortable truths and the actionable strategies. And that decision, to stay, to finish, to take this seriously, already tells you something important about the version of yourself that is emerging. So before we go any further, acknowledge that. Because the person who presses play is not always the same person who reaches the final chapter. Something has shifted in you during this journey. And that shift, however subtle it feels right now, is the most valuable thing you will take away from this entire experience. Now let's use this final chapter to do something that no previous chapter has done. Let's bring everything together. Let's look at the complete picture. Every concept, every strategy, every identity principle assembled into a single, coherent vision of what your financial life looks like when all of it is working simultaneously. And then let's talk honestly about the only thing standing between you and that life right now. The complete picture. What the architect's life actually looks like. Let's paint the picture in full color, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived daily reality. Because financial freedom is not a number. It is not a net worth threshold or an account balance or a retirement age. It is a completely different relationship with time, choice, and possibility. Here is what the architect's life looks like on an ordinary Tuesday morning in America. You wake up without an alarm, not because you're lazy, but because your schedule belongs to you. You check your phone and see that your rental property management app shows rent was collected automatically from 2 tenants overnight. Your digital course platform shows 3 new enrollments from people who discovered your content while you were sleeping. Your dividend portfolio made its quarterly distribution yesterday, and the automatic reinvestment has already purchased additional shares on your behalf. Before you've had your first cup of coffee, money has moved toward you from 4 different directions, none of which required your presence, your performance review, or your manager's approval. You spend your morning on what genuinely matters to you. Maybe that's your family. Maybe that's a creative project. Maybe that's building your next system, not because financial survival demands it, but because building is something you now do naturally. The way a musician plays even when no one is paying them, because it is simply who they are. Your afternoon involves a conversation with your accountant about the tax strategy for your expanding portfolio. A call with a property manager about a minor maintenance issue at your second rental. An hour updating your course content with information your students have been requesting. These are not the tasks of someone grinding through a career they're trapped in. These are the tasks of someone managing assets they own, and there is a profound difference in how that feels. Your salary, if you still choose to work, is no longer the thing your life depends on. It is one stream among several. A contribution to your building fund. A tool in your financial architecture. Not a cage. Not a ceiling. Not the single thread your entire financial life is hanging from. That is the architect's life. And it is not a fantasy reserved for tech billionaires or inheritance recipients. It is the compounded result of the specific decisions and disciplines this audiobook has walked you through, applied consistently over a realistic timeline by ordinary people with ordinary starting points. The lesson distilled, everything this audiobook taught you. 9 chapters of content, dozens of frameworks, examples, and strategies. Let's compress the entire journey into its essential core, because the most powerful ideas are always simple at their foundation, even when the path to understanding them is rich and layered. From Chapter 1, the salary is not security. It is a single point of failure dressed in the costume of stability. Real security comes from multiple streams of income, each one independent enough to keep flowing when another one is interrupted. From Chapter 2, the obstacle was never money, timing, or external circumstances. It was the psychological architecture of fear, perfectionism, comparison, and identity lock. You named those forces. You cannot be ambushed by something you can clearly see. From Chapter 3, cash flow systems are built on 4 pillars: assets, intellectual property, networks, and processes. Each pillar is accessible to regular people. Each one can be layered onto the others to create a compounding financial machine that grows more powerful with time. From Chapter 4, the one system rule is not a limitation. It is the discipline that separates people who actually build from people who perpetually plan. One system, fully built, consistently producing, before the second one begins. Singular focus is not a constraint on ambition. It is the condition that makes ambition achievable. From Chapter 5, you were already earning enough. The leaks, lifestyle inflation, subscription drain, convenience premium, high interest debt, were consuming the resources that should have been building your freedom. Plugging those leaks didn't require earning more. It required seeing clearly what was already leaving. From Chapter 6, money without a deployment strategy is just money that disappears. The 3 zones, the deployment sequence, the multiplication mindset, and the intelligent use of leverage are the tools that transform redirected resources into compounding assets. From Chapter 7, scaling is not doing more of the same thing faster. It is engineering your system to produce more output with proportionally less input, through optimization, automation, delegation, and replication in that precise sequence, only after the system is demonstrating consistent output, documented process, and positive unit economics. From Chapter 8, the deepest work of financial freedom is identity work. You cannot consistently do what your identity does not support. The 5 identity statements, the environment architecture, and the accumulated evidence of consistent action are what transform financial aspiration into financial identity, from something you're trying to become into something you simply are. From Chapter 9, the tax code is not neutral. It was written to reward business ownership and investment. Every year you spend as a pure employee without understanding the business owner's tax advantages is a year of overpayment that compounds in the wrong direction. The wealthy don't pay less because they cheat. They pay less because they learn the rules and use them completely. That is 9 chapters of transformation compressed into 9 paragraphs. But the compression only works because you experienced the full depth of each one. The summary points to the mountain. You climbed it. The timeline truth. What realistic freedom actually requires. Before we close, let's have one final honest conversation. Because this audiobook would be doing you a disservice if it left you with inspiration without grounding it in realistic expectation. Building the architect's life takes time. Not decades of suffering, but years of patient, consistent, compounding effort. And the timeline varies enormously based on your starting point, your income level, your available time, and the specific systems you choose to build. For some people, the first meaningful cash flow system, one generating $1,000 or more per month consistently, takes 8 to 12 months of focused work. For others, it takes 18 to 24 months. For others still, working with more limited resources and time, it takes longer. None of these timelines is wrong. All of them lead to the same destination if the direction is consistent. What matters infinitely more than how fast you move is that you keep moving. Because the compounding nature of cash flow systems means that the progress in year 3 dwarfs the progress in year 1. Not because you worked harder in year 3, but because the systems you built in year 1 have had 2 years to mature, expand, and fund the construction of everything that came after them. The people who achieve the architect's life are not the ones who moved fastest. They are the ones who started and didn't stop. They are the ones who had bad months and kept building, who faced setbacks and recalibrated instead of quitting, who stayed focused on the long game in a culture that is obsessed with immediate results. You are capable of being one of those people. Not someday. Starting now. The final question. And the only answer that matters. We began this audiobook with a question that was designed to stop you in your tracks. What if the paycheck you've been chasing your entire life is actually the thing keeping you broke? You now know the answer. Not just intellectually, but viscerally, structurally, strategically. You understand why the salary system limits you. You understand how cash flow systems work. You understand the psychology of staying stuck and the identity shift required to break free. You understand deployment, scaling, tax strategy, and the architecture of a life that pays you whether you're working or not. But here is the only question that actually matters now. The one that determines whether everything you've absorbed in this audiobook changes your life or simply occupies a pleasant memory of a time you felt inspired. What are you going to do differently tomorrow morning? Not next month. Not when things settle down. Not after the holidays or after the kids go back to school or after you feel more ready. Tomorrow morning. Are you going to open your bank statement and do that financial leak audit? Are you going to set up that automatic transfer to a high-yield savings account? Are you going to write down the 3 business ideas that have been living rent-free in your mind for the past 2 years and run them through the 4-question filter? Are you going to look up one CPA who specializes in small business taxation and schedule a consultation? Pick one. Just one. Something small enough to be genuinely doable tomorrow and significant enough to represent a real first step in a new direction. Because here is what every person who has ever built financial freedom understands at their core. The architect's life is not given. It is built. One decision at a time. One system at a time. One deliberately chosen morning at a time. The blueprint is in your hands. The tools are in your possession. The identity is already beginning to form. You can feel it, can't you? That quiet, growing sense that this is possible, that you are capable, that the life you've been imagining is not a fantasy but a plan that simply needs execution. The salary told you what you were worth. The system you build will show you what you're actually capable of. You just completed cash flow mastery. Think in systems, not salaries. If this audiobook moved something in you, if it shifted your thinking, challenged your assumptions, or gave you a framework you genuinely intend to use, then do one more thing before you close out of this video. Hit that subscribe button on Mindset Audiobooks, because this is exactly the kind of content we build for you every single week. Full-length audiobooks designed to reshape not just what you know about money, success, and freedom, but who you become in relationship to all 3. Share this audiobook with one person in your life who needs to hear it. Not everyone will be ready, but someone in your circle is sitting exactly where you were at the beginning of Chapter 1, waiting for someone to show them that a different financial life is genuinely possible. Be that person for them. And remember, the most expensive thing you will ever own is a mind that hasn't been given the tools to build with. You have the tools now. Go build something extraordinary.